Okay, this is amazing. I've got a special guest today, R&B sensation Tony Terry, and definitely looking forward to this interview. And I hope you guys enjoy our interview with him.
Oh, this will be great then, because I
Yeah,
have a lot to say.
yeah, that's gonna be great. But I think we're starting off because our audience is international as well. We know you're from the US, but what part were you sort of born and raised?
I was born in North Carolina, in
Okay,
Southern Pines, North Carolina, which is a golf town. It's actually one of the premier golf cities in the world, and pretty much everybody who is anybody in the golf world, they come through there to play, or they have a home there, and uh, and it's really quite funny that I do not play golf.
okay, okay. And but being from North Carolina, I mean, when it comes to sort of with stuff with music, was there any inspiration about music around during those days?
Yeah, church.
Okay,
Almost daily, because my grandmother was, um, I wouldn't say radical, but she was very much committed to her spiritual journey. And so we spent a lot of time in church. And she was also my inspiration, because she walked around the house singing, while cleaning or cooking, and she had a beautiful voice. And she encouraged me to sing. I probably stood by my grandma, and she taught me a few things. She taught me how to cook.
okay,
I,
yeah.
I stood by my grandmother's side while she cooked and baked, and I learned how to cook and bake, and from scratch. And I take pride in having that, and that it came from my grandmother.
You know, it's interesting because from those of us who aren't in the US, there's the lot of the perception we have is you've got so much things like basketball, football, baseball,
Mhm.
and sports generally would dominate. But for you, you said singing became more of an inspiration and a vessel more so than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I played sports as a kid, out in the streets with my friends in the neighborhood. But music was really always my calling, and I knew it. Like, I never had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I just continued to do what I do, and that's sing. And it has the next thing that happened, and the next thing that happened seemed like the next logical thing that would happen in
Yeah.
my career as I was growing into it, from show to show, from audition to audition, and finally getting into the Duke Ellington School of the Arts as a junior in high school. It just seemed like, I didn't have to figure it out. I didn't. What am I going to do with my life? I didn't have to do any of that.
What do you mean? Did it just were doors just opening without you having to go looking for them?
Okay. Okay. So I was a student at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts,
Yeah.
and at the time, the founders of the school were still alive and very much involved in the everyday running of the school. And Mike Malone, one of the founders, became a friend of mine. And every summer there was a program called the Summer Youth Employment Program that the mayor of DC had started, Mayor Marion Barry. And because of that
Oh,
program,
Marion Barry.
yeah, he was one of DC's favorite mayors, even
Yeah,
with all the troubles that he had.
yeah.
Um, Even if he were alive today, he'd probably be mayor of DC. um, while I was doing that program, and that's really where we got the fundamental um, basics about what it was going to require. The rehearsal time, the dedication. We're going to do it until we get it right, and we're not leaving until we get it right. All that kind of attitude. Um, my third summer, which was my last summer after that I aged out of the program. It was
Yeah.
the last summer that I could do the program, and I was a senior in high school. And Mike Malone, who we highly revered, came to me and put his hand on my shoulder at the end of that summer and said, "You're ready. You can go with my blessing to New York." And I thought I had been blessed by the king. I mean, I really felt like, if Mike Malone says that I'm ready, then I'm ready. And and which was funny, because when I auditioned for the school initially, he didn't want me in.
Oh.
He didn't think I was ready. But there was a lady there who also later became one of my friends. She said, "Yeah, but the boy can sing." And I got in. And so Mike gave me his blessing. I didn't leave. I graduated high school in 1982. I didn't leave DC until 1984 when I was working a regular job. And I heard about an audition that Mike Malone was having in New Jersey at the Crossroads Theater, which is one of the premier Black theaters in the country. And I quit my job when I heard about the audition.
Because
I quit.
Mike was the one doing it.
Yeah, but I didn't know that didn't necessarily, that wasn't an automatic that I was going to be in because
Okay.
he was doing it. But I just quit my job.
Wow.
I quit my job. I didn't do it in a way that would allow me to come back. I and I was the manager at that point. I told my assistant, "You're the boss." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm out. I'm out." He said, "What do you mean out?" I'm saying, "I'm never coming back." And I left. We drove up to New Jersey, did the audition, and my cousin and I, and we both were cast. We both were cast in the show. But the thing was that I had no idea of what the pay was going to be. So it turns out the pay was $35 a week.
Okay.
And nobody can survive off of $35 a
Okay. Not even in 84.
week. Not even in 84. And so that required us to have to live in the theater that we were working in. So
Oh,
I slept under my dressing room table for 6 months,
wow.
which was fine. I mean, I was having the time of my life. We were having the time of our lives. It was a time that I would not go back and change any part of, because it was like paying my dues. Like I was paying my dues, and I knew that that's what was happening. But we were having the time of our lives, so it was really great. That show was over. Oh, so while we were rehearsing for the show, one of the band members um, came over to me, probably about maybe a month in, and he said, "I don't know about these other guys, but you are a star."
Wow.
I know I never really thought that of myself, and no one had ever said that to me before. And I thought, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You got it. You have that it thing that's going to take you there." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." But then the show was over, and by the time the show was over, he and I, Daryl Mull is his name, he's a New Yorican, Black Puerto Rican guy from Harlem, very high energy, typical New York energy.
Yeah.
And after the show was over, I started working on some music with him, and we wrote a demo together, a song called "Don't Hold Out," and then I was kind of on the fence about whether I'm going to stay in New York or go back to DC, and wasn't really feeling good about my time. I had auditioned for this one particular show, "Mama, I Want to Sing," which is the longest the longest off-Broadway show in off-Broadway history.
Mm.
And so I had done the show for a while. I was kind of ready to go back, but a few days before I was scheduled to go back, we went out to check out a band. Checked out the band. The band was good. And afterwards, the place was packed. It was so packed, it was a fire hazard. Not
Yeah.
even room. There was not even enough space if somebody were to fall, or there wasn't room for that.
Yeah.
um, so the band leader came afterwards because he was a friend of Daryl. He was like, "Yo, what did y'all think?" And I'm young and cocky, and I say, "No, y'all were all right." You had one crucial element that was missing, though, that would have really made it pop. He said, "What's that?" I said, "Me."
Okay.
So
You started to believe in yourself now. What was going on?
and so I started. He said, "Okay, here's your time. Here's your time to shine." So I started singing for him in this crowded room, and there was a gentleman standing behind me that I wasn't even aware that was behind me. And he turned around. I guess he heard me, and he said, he goes, where did you come from?" And I'm sure I said something sarcastic. And he gave me his card, introduced himself as Ted Courier, and I held on to his card for about 2 weeks. But when I did call him, it was about 11 p.m., which is not unusual for a musician, especially if you're working. and he was excited to hear from me, and was wondering why it took so long for me to call him. And he was in the studio in New York. I was staying in New Jersey at this point. He was in the studio at Unique Recording on 47th and 7th, and he invited me over. So I had to get on the bus, get on the PATH train, get on the subway, and then walk up to the studio. And when I got there, he had Parliament Funkadelic.
George Clinton.
And I was like, what?
But George Clinton, a part of that, I suppose, was there?
No, George wasn't there.
Okay, okay.
But he is part of, but he had Gary Cooper. You remember the guy that wore the diaper, played bass?
Yeah.
Gary Scheider,
Okay.
who became a really good friend of mine. He was there. Michael Cooper, several of the other notable players, but George was not there. But they were recording, and they were working on a project for the Boogie Boys, and the Boogie Boys had just come off of a fly girl, fly girl, fly girl. Right, it was a big hit record for them in the 80s, and they were working on the follow-up to that. So I meet Daryl there, and I was blown away that Parliament was there. But side note, I learned what funk music was all about because they didn't smell too good.
Yeah.
That's the truth. And it's about, so the funk music is a real thing. It came from that. They wouldn't bathe for days.
Wow.
They wouldn't bathe for days.
Oh, goodness.
They did. And so my friend Daryl, in his New York cocky way, was like, yo, Ted, if you put my boy Tony in the booth, you'll fire all them jokers. And Ted was like, oh, really? Of course, he had just smoked a joint about the size of my thumb. And he was like, okay. And then he called whoever was in the booth out. I don't remember who it was, but he sent me in. And then they started giving me parts to do on this record. And I was nailing him. One take, boom. He started calling me One Take Tony. And it happened so fast. While I was working on that project, well, he did fire Parliament. He fired them. And I ended up doing the vocals on that project. So while I was recording, his wife and partner asked me to come into this room and sing for this group of people that were there that I was unaware of who they were. And I was already recording, I was warmed up. So I walked into the room and sang for them. And I sang Ribbon in the Sky. And when I left that room, they offered me a 7-album deal. Just like that. And I didn't even have time to prepare. I wasn't nervous because I didn't know I didn't know that they were Capitol Records. I didn't know that I was auditioning. I was just singing. And so it turned into that. I got a 7-album deal on Capitol Records. And the gentleman who was responsible for me in the A&R department was fired soon after I got signed. And the music business is an ego-driven business. So the next guy who replaced him was not really interested in me because he didn't sign me. He was interested in making his mark by signing and discovering his own acts. And so the gentleman that was fired was hired at Epic, and he convinced Epic Records over at Sony to buy my contract from Capitol. And all this happened before I sang a note.
Okay. Now, I wanted to get back a little bit to the fact that you were in theater, and I would assume that there's a difference in the theater type of work, and were you thinking career-wise, Broadway and stuff, or did you just think recording artist in those early days?
At that time, I didn't have a focus, like what it was going to be specifically.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I had done some recording, I'd done some theater work. I liked it all. There were things that I learned fundamentally in theater that would apply to, let's say, doing a concert every night. And so it was kind of like whatever one paid the most,
Okay.
whichever one's check cleared first is the one I'm gonna do.
But in those days, though, did you get to know the because, as I said, with the theater, it looks as if those in theater work a lot harder, but don't get as paid and as much as, say, recording. But for yourself, it was just the experience, the things moving so quickly.
Listen, the theater world is much more work. When I was doing Mama, I Want to Sing,
Yeah.
which was a 2.5 hour show,
Wow.
we did 10 shows a week.
Wow.
10. And we would do three of those 10 shows would happen on Saturday.
Wow.
So by Saturday night, you would be completely spent. But we were young, 21, 22. You know,
Yeah.
you could do 3 shows and then go out to the club, and then,
Okay.
which we did a few times. um, but the experience, you know, the work ethic I had
Yeah.
already gotten from being a student at Duke Ellington, so it
Okay.
wasn't that much. It wasn't that challenging. Um, I think the theater work it might be a little bit more difficult in terms of. Let me use Shakespeare as an example because it's something that everybody knows about, and it's a piece that it's a period piece, but you can't improv Shakespeare.
Mm.
You have to do the lines as they
Yeah.
are written. You
Yeah.
can't change anything. Otherwise, you're not doing Shakespeare.
Mm.
And the difference in like doing a concert or whatever is that I have the liberty to talk about something differently every night. I have the liberty to change my song up a little bit if I want to. I have
Yeah.
those liberties that I don't have doing legit theater.
Yeah.
And so I got to appreciate both mediums for the differences that they have. Um, so once I got settled in my recording situation, I was signed to the label with Michael Jackson, Luther Vandross, Tina Marie, Mariah Carey was on the other side across the hall at Columbia, and I was this new kid that they spent all this money on and didn't know what to do with. Didn't had not figured out what my lane was going to be, and so I just started recording, and I started recording, and the last song that I worked on for my first album came about because I ran into one of my high school friends in New York while I was just taking a break.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen him since high school. He was a theater student, but he told me he had started writing songs, and I asked him to play one for me at that point. And he played a song for me, and it was She's Fly, my first single.
Oh
So
yeah.
I was so excited. I took him back to the studio. I was like, Ted, we have to do this. Ted Currier's claim to fame, he has many. He was the first DJ to do live mixes on radio in New York
Wow.
on 92 KTU back in the maybe late 70s, early 80s. And he produced Atomic Dog for George Clinton. He
Wow.
produced music by a group called Black Britain. Um, he produced many hit records,
Yeah.
many hit projects that he was involved in. And so we were working on the album. I told him that, you know, George had written this song, and I played it for him. We got to cut it, and he got excited, and we cut it. Well, I had the flu. Funny. And I started working on the song, and the first line is, "Hey, you got me jumping. Your big butt, beautiful body is showing up bumping." That was supposed to be the line.
Yeah.
But I said, "Hey, you got me jumping. Your beautiful body is showing up." And Ted was like, "That's it. Oh no, that's it. We keep it." I was like, "No. That was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that." He was like, "If you think I'm erasing that, you're out of your mind.
This ain't Shakespeare.
This ain't Shakespeare." And so we kept it, and that was the first line of the song, and it ended up being the first single from the album that just kicked the doors in.
Now, I mean, I'm sure your grandma would say, "No, I've been playing for you from day one, so I'm not surprised how quickly everything has gone for you." But you're talking about getting a recording contract with Epic Records. I mean, that's you know, they had Michael Jackson, they had all these big stars. Was it not overwhelming? Did you understand the sort of the contracts they're sending you, and royalties and all that stuff? Was you just sign and sing? I mean, what was that like?
I didn't know jack squat. I didn't have a mentor. No one helped me navigate.
Yeah.
I was young, and which is why I think it's so important to educate people and, you know, and give the information, because most people in the music business, well, the music business has a reputation of being filled with crooks and snakes and people that don't really care about you.
Yeah.
And I found that in a lot of ways to be true.
Yeah.
Because I signed with the company. I'm not saying anything derogatory about Ted Curry because he was not one of those people. He did and does care. In fact, I stay in touch with him. But there were people that were on his team that I began that early on, right away, began to treat me as if I were family, and made me feel very at ease and comfortable, and began to shower me with gifts. I later on found out that I paid for all those gifts. They wasn't gifts at all. I was buying my own stuff. And if I knew that, then I would have got the one that I really wanted.
Yeah.
Of whatever it was. Like I had the biggest boom box that a person could have and have it on your show, that you could carry around. I had the first dual-sided Sony Walkman.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just gifts. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take it. And I was paying for that stuff. I didn't realize we were taking trips upstate New York to go fishing, and I was paying for that too.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it. And the more I learned, the less interested they were in having me be involved. Because I know more now. You can't really pull the wool over my eyes, but they did. I got a few times, and one of those, another way that I got was that I signed a publishing deal with EMI that I didn't know I was signing, and it was a $250,000 deal, and I got $10,000, and I didn't know, and I was happy to get that $10,000.
Yeah,
but I didn't know that there was another. $240,000 to be had.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And so I just think it's important that, people know that if they're going to get involved in this or any other business, that they do themselves a service by understanding business, and then having someone around you in your corner at every meeting you go to that cares about you.
Yeah. I think one of the hard things for me is, as much as I've enjoyed talking with yourselves and early other artists, is hearing the same type of stories that has happened to now mainly the Black artists, because I'm talking to R&B artists. But it's very heartbreaking to find out how people know what they're doing, taking advantage of young, inspiring acts.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, it's like if you come to them and you don't know anything about this business, you are perfect.
Yeah. Wow.
And they saw dollar signs. In fact, the dollar signs were so vivid to them that I could see the dollar signs in their eyes.
Wow.
And it was good when it was good.
Yeah.
But when it began to spiral was because I knew more. I knew too much.
Yeah.
And then you couldn't play me as easily.
And that's what I've been hearing from others, is that you almost have to know enough that they don't know that you know, but you know enough to be guarded, but not to let them know that you've caught on to what they're doing. But before we get to that, it'd be good just to go through the process of your first album, because what was that like then, recording your first album? You've got your good friend who writes the first single, the first release single, but the rest of the album, what was that like? Were you involved in writing, in the production and everything? Okay.
I was. Ted trusted what I brought, as an artist, as a singer. He trusted me, but on the other side, this was during the analog days, so we didn't have the digital machines to fix problems and correct things. So we had to do them right. They had to be right. And Ted was very strident. We did it until it was right. Wow. So I learned how to do vocal production absolutely correctly. Like I would stack six parts of one note, 6 tracks of one note, and they would be so perfectly matched that there was no rubbing. No, they started at the same time, they stopped at the same time, and he gave me that.
Wow.
Nowadays, if you sing one of those tracks flat or sharp, don't worry about it. We'll fix it.
Yeah. All the tunes and stuff.
Auto tune or Melodyne or something, and just fix it. And with today's technology, you can literally take a person who cannot sing and make them sound like a singer. You can
Yeah,
do that.
I
It's
don't want to name
happening.
names, but that they make, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I know, so we
Yeah,
don't need to name no
yeah,
names.
yeah, yeah. But then, so when you were recording your album, then, who were those around? Because this was probably 87, 88. I know that Keith Sweat and I'll Be
Yeah, it was
Sure.
actually 86. The album came out October 1987, and
Okay.
it came out the same week as I'll Be Sure's first single.
Oh my
Keith
goodness.
Sweat, Keith Sweat had I Wanna.
Oh,
Tony had Hey Little Walter.
oh my goodness.
And I had She's Fly. Um,
Was guy.
Johnny Kemp had Just Got Paid.
Okay.
It was all the same week.
Wow.
Our records came out the same week. Guy had their single,
Groove Me.
their first, yeah, Groove Me. That came out the same week.
How was that like then for you? Did you feel was it fun, or was it nerve-wracking, or was it almost like,
No,
oh
it
my
wasn't nerve
goodness?
wracking. No, it wasn't nerve wracking. It was fun. I was having the time of my life. I mean, I had my cousin there who I had just recently discovered was my cousin, even though we had worked in different things together, different
Okay.
shows together. I had only recently discovered that he was my cousin. And when I found that out, we instantly became best friends. And from there, moving forward until he left this earth, he worked on everything that I worked on. And so I had somebody with me. He wasn't around when I signed the deal, and I don't know that he knew much more than I did and would have
Okay.
been able to be of assistance.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good time. We enjoyed the process. I
Yeah.
enjoyed the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did you have a favorite, apart from the fact that She's Fly, did you have a favorite song off your first album that you were like, man, this is it?
Well, there was the song Lovey-Dovey was the very first song that I ever wrote, and I wrote that song on the subway on the way to my very first recording session, which was not with Ted. It was with another producer, Dr. Bob Kazuri. And I'm on the one train going from Harlem to downtown, and I'm thinking, what am I going to sing? I had no idea, like what I'm going to do at this first recording session. I hadn't even met Bob Kazuri yet. So I started writing, is that lovey feeling I get with you on
Wait,
the
wait,
train.
what do you mean you started writing it? Was it that stuff coming to you, or?
Yeah, it was just coming to me. It was just
Wow.
coming to me. And then I said, and then I started singing, I used to think the love was so, and I'm mumbling it. The love was so sweet.
Wow.
And I'm writing the words. Then I said, that's corny. And I tried to scratch it. But the idea wouldn't go away. That's all I could think about was, I used to think the love was so silly then, all that kissing and stuff. That what you do. And it just was writing, it just came. And so I got to the studio and I had written the song
Wow.
on the train. And when I got there, the producer was working on music, and it was the music that ultimately was Lovey-Dovey. So I knocked on his door. He opened it. I had to wait until he turned off the music because it was so loud. And I knocked on the door, and he opened it, and I immediately said, "What is that?" And he said, "Oh, this is just something I'm working on for En Vogue. This is not for you." I said, but I just wrote. I was excited. I just wrote this. I just wrote this song on the train, and I was standing outside the door before I knocked in, and it fit. Like my song fit that music. And he was like, "Oh, really? Well, then let me hear it." So I sang my song to this track, and it fit like a glove. And he was like, "Well, let's record it." He said, "It used to be for En Vogue, but they don't have to know."
Wow.
And so that turned out to be Lovey-Dovey. Yeah,
Mike.
and then I got David Cole from CNC Music Factory.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
did all of the keyboard work on it.
Wow.
Lovey-Dovey,
Yeah.
Lovey-Dovey, did all that stuff, and he played on it. And
Did you know when it was recorded and stuff that, wow, this is going to be a big track, or did you just what was the feeling like? Because it's when you're hearing a story that it's just, talking to Melvin Riley, talking about how he writes the song comes into his head, and did you then feel like this is going to be a hit because it just popped in my head and
no,
everything? Okay.
I didn't. we were having a good time, and that's what we were doing. I was enjoying the process. I wasn't having foresight.
Yeah.
I wasn't imagining, oh, this is going to be a hit. But Ted would say, you wait, you just wait. This is going to, this whole process, is going to change your life.
Wow.
And so I was like, really? Like, I couldn't imagine what the change would be, and how radical it would be.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh man, you're going to have the women coming at you. I was like, I am. Well, then let's get to getting. And, and, it was fun. It really was a good time. The times were good. We were enjoying the process, and I was just letting it happen. And it turned out, some of the songs were not my favorites, but then as a body of work, I enjoy it. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed even listening to myself from album to album and hearing the growth, hearing the maturity. And that was interesting. That's been interesting. Even now, how my new music sounds, or my voice has matured even more since then. And I'm constantly working on music, but I'm also constantly being a student of voice and learning. And I'm still finding out things, realizing things about myself vocally that I'm just discovering, and I'm 56.
Yeah, oh goodness. The one thing I had to always say that I remember, because I was born in the UK, but my folks are from Nigeria, so I remember living there for high school, then moving to the US for college. But when watching you have the look of somebody from Nigeria, like the light skin, actually from an Igbo tribe, and I used to be one of the only ones who had that sort of I won't say African look, but you had that sort of look. So you were very different and stood out.
Wow.
And so I always look at your video and says, well, he could have been. He looks like one of somebody from my family and stuff.
Well, when I was in New York, I apparently looked Dominican or Puerto Rican.
Oh yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, and I would, often people would just walk up to me and start speaking Spanish, and I'm like, hey,
yeah.
No habla español. I'm gonna need English. English.
Okay, I can imagine so. But just as because you came out in a really fascinating era, because you talked about Albie Shaw, Keith Sweat, and talked about Guy, and that was, there was a shift in music, with the whole New Jack Swing and the whole Uptown Records, from that 87 to the early 90s. So it was a shift in music, because prior to the time when you guys came out, there was still and I think Luther, to some extent, our R&B music was either we had the Deal and the Time and the Gap Band and stuff. So we had that was mainly our black music. Even Patti LaBelle, there was bands, and there was sort of that adult contemporary. So we didn't have a number of young males or females performing, singing, and you guys sort of launched that until we got into the 90s. But did you realize, because when you're thinking Keith Sweat and Albie Shaw, who else did you look and see who was in your lane, or who were you who was your inspiration when you were coming out in those first couple of years?
That's a good question. Jodeci also. Jodeci they sang background for me, and I didn't have any money. You know what I gave them? A chicken dinner and $50.
Oh, on what track?
On Everlasting Love, the remix.
They
each got a 2-piece chicken dinner and $50.
Had they signed to Uptown by that time, or?
They were just working on their deal at that time.
Oh, are they from were they from your hometown state, North Carolina?
They're from my home state, but I didn't know them.
Okay.
I knew them because they were a gospel group as children, and I had heard them sing, and I was blown away. And I contacted them, and I wasn't even sure that they would do it, but they were like, "Yeah." I was like, "I ain't got no money, but I'll take care of you."
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, they came over, and we had a ball, and we ate, and we sang, and I gave them their $50, a crispy $50 bill, and they were happy to get it.
Wow. And so were they featured as? Were they featured as featuring Jodeci, or did they have the name?
It was the remix was Everlasting Love remix featuring Jodeci.
Wow.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. But then, and that's an amazing story. But I think, could you tell that they were going to do what they were going to do after when they were working with you? Did you think, well, these guys are going to be trendsetters?
They were great. They were great. I mean, they were great. And I didn't see. I don't look at it as competition, and a lot of people do. I
Mm.
don't look at it like I'm gonna murder the audience tonight, and I'm gonna sing circles around. Uh, I'll be sure tonight. I'm gonna tear them up. I don't think
Yeah.
like that, but I know people that do. I'm gonna get them,
Yeah.
and that gets them all pumped up and ready. But I just want to be good at what I do.
Yeah.
So I don't look. I think there's enough of the pie for us each to have a slice.
Yeah.
And so that's how I've always approached it. I'm not in competition with you.
Yeah.
I'm on the same bill as you. So clearly we're not competing. We are working together.
But
That's how I always looked at it and
did
still do.
yeah. But I'm just wondering, because as I said, that's such an amazing era. That, I mean, this is when music was really inspired a lot of us. Were you guys did, were you guys able to form good friendships, with those people like Keith and Al and stuff, or was it very much the rivalry and like who's going to be?
That is a good question. Like we knew each other. I worked with Jodeci a lot on the road. I worked with Al B. Sure a lot on the road. I worked with Keith Sweat a lot on the road. But we all had our own universes, if you will, and people swirling around us. So it didn't really allow us the opportunity to forge relationships of our own, together. I remember being on the road later in the 90s and early 2000s with R. Kelly, and they were in public announcement,
Okay.
and we worked together a lot. And they would always ask me to hang out. R. Kelly would ask me to hang out every time I saw him, and I never did, not once. And I don't know why I was kept away, because clearly there was something going on, as we later discovered,
Yeah.
that came out in the wash. And
Yeah.
I came from a very spiritual and praying family.
Yeah.
And I've always felt like I've had a covering, a shield of protection around me that was there even when I was too foolish
Yeah.
or too ignorant to realize that I was in a situation that I shouldn't have been in. I was always protected. Well, I
Yeah.
guess whatever the other person's or people's intentions were for me didn't happen, because I'm a child of God and He wouldn't let it happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
What did your grandmom think about the fact that was she around when you got signed and you
yeah,
came out? What was her thoughts?
yes, she was proud of me. She was proud of me because I was using my gift to make a living.
Yeah. So you had your two albums. I know you had, there was 2 albums you did with Epic.
Yeah, and yes,
Okay.
I did the first 2 albums with Epic, and at that time, before I go into why I left Epic,
Yeah.
the second album, the first single was Head Over Heels. It was time to choose the next single, which I had already decided. I wanted to be With You. And the record company president at the time, Dave Glue, I'll go ahead and name him, called me in for a meeting. And so my managers and I went in, and he was like, Tone, I gotta tell you, we don't think this song is a good idea. And, we kind of want you to, we're going to choose something else. I was like, no, it's going to be this one. We probably went back and forth for a good hour, and I just wouldn't budge. It has to be With You. And I guess they thought they would teach me a lesson and show me, because he literally said, oh, this song is so corny that only Stevie Wonder could get away with singing a song like this. But I just wasn't hearing it. So you got to remember, back in the days, or during that time, there were at least 40 or so major labels.
Yeah.
each of them with their own local promotion team that would service radio with vinyl, of course. And probably weekly, each of those 40 labels would release 5 to up to 10 artists, or whoever they got, or however many they got, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And so we've got 40 labels with several artists going to the same radio station on music day, on Monday or Tuesday, or whatever day that was. And the program director has 5 slots to fill. So it's impossible that all those records are going to get played or get added. And so my record was serviced to radio with a blank label, white label, that had handwritten information on it. And in my mind, in retrospect, that would have made that particular piece stand out. If it's in a pile of other records and you see this one blank label, well, what's this? And it was my song, With You, and it started to live. It was slow. It was slow cooking.
It was different.
It was a simmer. It's a simmer. And then it started to just, slowly creep up. And then one day I was walking into my manager's office, and we had a receptionist, but maybe she was in the restroom. She wasn't at the desk. Phone was ringing, and I answered it because it seemed like that's what I was supposed to do. I answered the phone, and on the other side was, "Hello, this is Anita Baker, and I'm looking for Tony Terry." And
Anita Baker.
I was like, "Yeah, right. Okay, I'll play. Let's play. This is Tony. Tony, how are you? Listen." And she told me about she was watching. She was in her bed asleep, and back in the days there was the Arsenio Hall show, and then a show came on after that called The Party Machine, which I had done Arsenio, but I was on The Party Machine, and that was hosted by Nia Peoples, who was at one point married to Howard Hewitt. I was on that show. She said that I was asleep in my bed, and I was awakened by one of the most beautiful songs I ever heard in my life. And I had to find you because I haven't seen a video, and I need to know what's going on. What's going on at your record company, baby? That's her talking to me. and I'm like, oh, I still don't know that I'm talking to her. I'm not sure that I'm talking to Anita Baker because I don't know her. I know of her. In fact, I had her album, and it was one of my favorites. But this couldn't be. It couldn't be real. And so she asked me, why was there no video? And I told her, well, Epic doesn't think the record's a hit. And so there's no video on the schedule, and I don't think we're going to do one. She was like, what? Those people wouldn't know a hit if it hit them in the forehead. And she said, I'm going to send you $50,000. And I want you to shoot the video for that song. In fact, I'm going to call my friend Blair Underwood because I want him to direct. And then I'm going to give you my publicist, his services for 6 months, Jay Swartz. I was like, well, why? Why are you going to send me $50,000? Why are you going to call Blair Underwood? Why are you giving me your publicist for 6 months? And then what am I supposed? How do I pay you back? And she said, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. I just want you to blow up.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. Well,
you believed it was her then?
Well, I wasn't sure until the check came. When the check showed up, I was like, oh, snap. It's real. And so we did just that. We went out to LA, met up with Blair Underwood. He directed the video. And if you've ever seen a With You video, this is only one. That's the one that he directed and that she executive produced. So I would call her.
Was he still in LA Law? Was he still in LA Law when?
He might have been, but this was his directorial debut. He never directed anything before With You. And so it happened. And then it started, it just wouldn't go away. It just started after the video came out, then the record really took off. And then my record company was like, we knew this was a brilliant record from the very beginning. I was like, what? And I got pissed. But my managers told me I couldn't, because I was the kind of guy that would say, no, you didn't. Y'all told me not to do this record. In fact, you told me only Stevie Wonder could do it. I would have been that guy.
Yeah.
But my managers was like, you can't do that. Let them have it. Let them think, you know, because you want them to be excited about working with you.
Yeah.
If they take the credit, let them have it. I didn't like that one bit. I didn't, because I knew that they didn't want the song. And so it turned out that the song was a hit, and it stayed on the charts probably longer. It set a record. I don't remember how long, but it stayed on a long time. Just would not go away. Like 9 months or something like that.
Wow.
Something insane. It stayed on a very, very long time. And so then we're now born. We've had She's Fly as a hit. We've had Lovey-Dovey as a hit. We've had Forever Yours. That's from the first album. Forever Yours as a hit. Head Over Heels was kind of mediocre, but With You took off. Everlasting Love took off.
Mm.
And it was time to start working on my third album. And so now my managers were like, okay, so now y'all, you know, we need some commitment from you guys. We have established him now. So we really need y'all to turn it up. And they were, somebody in the heat of the moment said something like, well, if you think you can find a better situation for Tony, go get it, make it happen. And they did. They found a situation for me at Virgin. And so I left. Epic and signed to Virgin. And they had Janet Jackson and After 7 and Was Not Was and a whole bunch of other huge groups at the time. And here I was, the new kid on the block again, feeling like I was starting over. And I started recording, and the most expensive video I ever did was with Virgin. I think it was $500,000.
Wow.
They flew me in a helicopter to the top of a flat top mountain in New Mexico, which is called a mesa. And they landed me and put me on this mesa with a boombox on a helicopter. And then they took off and began to circle around the mesa while I'm singing, When a Man Cries, you know, and it was just beautiful, beautiful video. But the helicopter got too close one time and almost blew me off, and I had to hit the deck. And I had on white.
Oh, goodness.
It wasn't white anymore.
Oh, goodness.
So they had to come get me and take me off the mountain.
Oh, you went mute. Oh, you went mute. Oh, Tony, your voice, you went mute. You went.
I'm muted?
Yeah, it did.
Are we good? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, yeah.
I can't hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now.
I cannot.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So the record company executive who was responsible for me being there, Gemma Corfield, she's British. And she and my manager, one of my managers, who was a female, they did not like each other. There was two bosses. In fact, I think they might have even had a physical confrontation.
Wow.
And the result of their disagreement ended up in me being dropped. This was after my first album, When a Man Cries, came out and did well. And they thought, okay, they gave me a bigger budget for the second album. And I was working on the second album in LA, and I got a phone call. It's a wrap, we're going home. And I didn't understand that. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, what do you mean? I'm in the studio cutting vocals. They were like, no, it's a wrap. And it just took me a minute to process that. What do you mean? Tell me, come out with it. What does this a rap mean?
Yeah.
They said, the record deal is over. And we're done. I was like, well, what happened? I didn't know. And it later came out in the wash that they had this conflict, and my being dropped from Virgin had literally absolutely nothing to do with me, but because of my management and the upper management at the label had this confrontation with each other. And that's how I ended up being dropped.
Wow. So I guess it's strange because in those days, especially in the 90s, you know, a record goes gold. That was massive back then because they weren't spending as much. They gave artists a lot of time to release videos and
Right.
songs, and there was a lot of development. And
Hmm.
so I'm just so
Absolutely.
you've had hits and consistency. You've got a lane. You've got an audience, and I was surprised Epic actually decided to let you go. But but
I don't think they realized that, even though that little statement was made in the heat of an argument, that my managers were going to take it and run with it. I don't think they realized that was going to happen.
but then now one when I think of Epic, we always talk about Michael, but um, it didn't seem like, say, Columbia, which was they had a sort of an urban sort of team out there. Didn't seem like Electra as well, that really had a committed urban team. It just seems Epic seemed to have had, because of Michael Jackson, really more of a pop, we're going global kind of thing. And so
Yeah,
I would have thought it might have been hard to get the type of support that you might have needed on Epic compared to if you
it
were on
was.
Columbia.
It was hard for many reasons. One of the least of which was that the head of the A&R department was Johnny Gill's godfather. And Hank, Hank, I can't think of it. Hank Caldwell. Hey, that's 30 years later now. I can call his name. Hank Caldwell. He was Johnny Gill's godfather, and he talked about Johnny Gill every day. And Johnny Gill was on Motown. He wasn't even on our label, but he was working with. He's supposed to be working with me, but he talked about Johnny Gill all the time. So it was difficult to get their attention. It seemed like, but I did learn a lot. I learned about developing relationships. I learned about, one day a couple of days, I spent at Epic literally calling every record store in the country, mom and pop and included, even if they only had one copy of my record in stock, and saying thank you.
Wow.
I called the radio stations, every single radio station that played my record, even if it was in super light rotation and they played it once a week. I called and said thank you. I got that from them. They were like, "You have to. This is about relationship building, branding." And then a couple of days, I went into the studio and I did individual IDs for every radio station it was literally 200 or 300 of them. So I would do, it's been a long day. I'm gonna take it kind of easy, relax a while. I wanna hear some mellow music on star 16, or whatever the radio station was.
Yeah.
And I said, all the radio stations, their personalized version of
Wow.
Everlasting Love. And it took Everlasting Love all the way up to the top.
My goodness.
I got that from Epic. They were like, we got to do these things. This is what's going to separate you from, the masses.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah. So, I mean, the stories of After Virgin. Did you then think, was there ever missing of the stage after you've left Virgin? And what was your thought then after you left Virgin? Did you think, let me try and get another deal, or let me go back to the stage? Or what did you do?
I did. I did try to get another deal. And I was not aware of, until it was over, that I had been blacklisted. Because we couldn't get a deal anywhere. And then I ended up getting an independent deal. But I was still working, still working based off the hits that I had. But I couldn't get a deal anywhere. And I later, after I was no longer on the blacklist, I found out that I had been blacklisted, and that's why I was unable to get anywhere. No one was interested in touching me.
How long was that for?
For about 15 years.
Wow.
And I had no idea. I didn't even know. And then somebody in the music business was like, you was blacklisted, right? I was like, what? Yeah, man, nobody was going to touch you. I was like, well, why would that be? And how come I wouldn't know that? I didn't know. But for about that long, I didn't, no one was really interested, which I thought was unusual. But then I got signed to Golden Boy Records, who had a massive hit with RJ's latest arrival, "Shackles on My Feet." Remember that?
Okay, yeah, yeah, Mary.
Well, it was Mary Mary covered it, but it was back in
Oh,
the RJ's latest arrival was the original performer of that
okay.
song, and it was massive. And he signed me, Eddie Gurin. He said he called me his golden boy. It just so happened that his label was called Golden Boy Records, and that he was going to retire from me.
Wow.
And it didn't quite work out that way, because when we finally put out the record, it was during the time that radio began to shift from R&B to rap more and more and more and more, and so there was really no spot for me to fill, and
Yeah.
it didn't really work as well as we thought it would. But then Stevie Wonder's KJLH, his radio station in Los Angeles, began to play a cut off of the album that was not a single, called "In the Shower," and it took off. It became this underground record that I wasn't even aware was happening,
Hmm.
and and then it started growing, especially in the Southeast. It started growing this, and it became a record that, like With You, I couldn't not sing. I had to sing it,
Hmm.
and so then I went on to do a gospel album, which people thought, well, you made the switch. No, I didn't make the switch. I started out in church,
Yeah,
and I'm a
yeah,
singer. I'm a
yeah.
singer. And so, y'all called me a balladeer. I didn't say that.
Hmm.
I'm a singer. I sing R&B, gospel, jazz, classical. I mean, just whatever the job requires, I can get it done. Um, when With You came out, it overshadowed everything. People forgot that I sang Head Over Heels and She's Fly and Lovey-Dovey. And I would do those songs and be like, oh, he did that too? Yeah, he did that. And, it's just really interesting, because With You came out and all of a sudden I was a balladeer,
Hmm. But
singer
then,
of love songs.
yeah, but what year did you sign with Golden Boy? What year was it on there?
That would have been in 2000, 2001.
Okay. Did you then find out, was it because of your management company, or that
Yes, yes. That I was blacklisted, or that everything else went spiraling out of control, was because of my
because they took you from Epic, and they're responsible for Virgin?
But they were also responsible for stealing from me, stealing my publishing, stealing, my, they would. Also, I'll go on tape saying they stole from me.
Wow.
And I made a lot of money, millions,
Especially
and
with
a
yeah
good
with
portion,
you. Yeah.
a good portion they stole, and they stole my publishing, and I didn't know it, and I was angry for years. And this is how I found out. Well, first of all, in the beginning, before I left my management company, I walked into one of my manager's offices, and my business bank book, checkbook, was on her desk, open, which was unusual because I wasn't there to discuss any banking information, and there was no reason for my checkbook to be out. And I happened to look at the ledger, and it said Andre's rent, Andre's rent, Andre's rent, Andre's rent, Andre's rent, who was my cousin, Andre's rent, who I was paying for months, the whole entire time, that because he had an apartment at the same building that we were living in, and I was paying his rent, and I didn't know it. So I was like, well, why are these checks for Andre, his rent, and I'm paying him? And then who decided that they were going to? And her response was, you had no business looking on my desk. I was like, but that's my checkbook, woman. And
Wow.
that led to the beginning of, it's just not going to work. And they were like, we made you, and you're going to be nothing without us. I was like, listen, you clearly have gotten it wrong. My parents made me, and I had a gift before I came to you that had nothing to do with you, and it came from God. So you didn't make me, and you didn't make me. You didn't create me. You didn't make me. And they were like, oh, it's over for you. And uh, I just thought it was funny that people think that they have the power to, block something that God said was going to be.
Yeah.
Nobody has the power to do that.
Yeah.
And I always believed that you don't have the authority to stop God from working. And I
Yeah.
trust him more than I trust you. I made a lot of mistakes. I learned some hard, valuable lessons.
Mm.
I did end up, leaving that company because I knew that I couldn't go further with them because I knew too much.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how much they had taken from me. So moving forward a few years, I get a call from an email from some German producers who have gotten hold of some acapellas of mine. I don't know how they got them, but they wanted to do some remixes and they wanted my blessing. And I gave them my blessing right away. Then afterwards, I began to look up to see what this meant, what it was going to mean to me for them to put out these songs, And during my research, I found out that I didn't own the publishing to those songs. Not only had she taken my publishing, but she sold it. And then it had been sold again. It had been sold like 3 times. Someone owned it, and that's what it was. So it didn't mean anything to me. And I called Ted Currier because I thought he was in on it. I was like, Ted, man, I thought we was cool, man. He was like, what are you talking about? Well, I was just doing some research because yada, yada, yada. And I found out that I didn't own my publishing. And then he said, that's why I haven't gotten a check in the past 20 years. I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? He said, I haven't gotten a publishing check for 20 years. And now that you're talking about this, I now know why, because it was his wife and she was taking his money too. He didn't know it. She's taking his money. She took his publishing, and now then they got divorced, and she's off living well and getting a check. Well, because I refuted all of that was going on, those checks stopped. They stopped coming because the publisher or the administrator of the royalty checks froze them until we could clear up who actually owns them and all that kind of stuff. So they're still on hold, and hopefully soon that those funds will be released to their proper owner, which is me.
It's heartbreaking to hear stuff like this. Unfortunately, I'm getting used to hearing these stories, but it's never easy to hear because it is the sense where you mentioned not having a mentor, and I don't know what it is about the music industry that it attracts the worst in people.
It attracts evil.
That
there's an underbelly. There's an underbelly in the music business, that people don't talk about. There's a dark side to the music business that people simply do not talk about. And recently there was a young lady who came out talking about she was exposing people and exposing details about the music business, Miss Jaguar Wright. I don't know Jaguar Wright. And I don't know that I've ever run into her. And I didn't realize that she was one of the original members of The Roots, I think. Sure. And she was exposing everybody, which I didn't know if what she was saying about the people that she was talking about was true or not. But then she started talking about things that happened in the music business and that she was aware of. And I knew those things to be true. Like I knew firsthand that those things were true. And so to me, that kind of gave some validity to the other things that she might have been talking about.
Yeah.
But I had been approached by people and invited to parties that I went to, but because of my covering, I didn't get pulled in, if you know what I mean. And I was at the door of the dark side. But I never crossed the threshold. And I have to believe that I had guardian angels protecting me. I really do believe it. I do. To this day, I believe it, and I believe that I was preserved. A lot of people that I saw trying to get there, trying to break through, especially the girls. They get used up.
Yeah.
And then they will get us. They might even get all the way to the point where they think it's just about to happen, and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then it's over forever, and then that person is ruined. And then the music business spits them out. And then go and finds the next one that that will service the room, if you will. And if that girl doesn't do it, then she's out. And the next girl, because there's always somebody who's willing to do anything to get it.
To get in.
and when I say anything, I mean anything.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because, you know, because I wasn't advised, I wasn't given information. When people ask me, what kind of advice would you give to an up and coming artist? I would say, if you're female, don't do it. Be a songwriter, be a publisher, because that's really
Yeah.
where the money is. And not only that, girls have it especially tough. And if you're a guy, well, sometimes even guys fall into the trap.
Yeah.
But the best thing I could tell you to do is to understand that you're entering a show business.
Yeah.
And you have to have some kind of business acumen, or if not you, somebody who's with you who does, that will protect you. Because if you don't have the information, it would not be in, someone else's favor to educate you.
Yeah.
If my intention is to, if my intention is to run game on you, and you come to me and you don't, well, not me, I'm just.
Yeah. I went mute again. Oh, I went. Oh, you went mute. Okay.
It's unmuted. It's just doing that by itself.
Oh, sorry, it's fine.
Now I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't? Okay. Okay.
Okay. I don't know why that's doing that.
That's okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Whatever question you have.
Yeah,
I like to talk. I like to talk.
No. I think what you're saying is true, and for a brief moment I was working at Edmonds Entertainment in Hollywood, Tracy Edmonds, and they had their record label, and I was really excited, and I remember I was doing in promotions, and I was helping them promote some of their new acts. John B was on the label, and they had a group of Third Story, and I got invited to a number of industry parties, and as part of being on the label, and I was seeing everybody, and I think I remember sitting at my desk, and I felt like almost like a dark cloak come over me. And I remember just crying out in the spirit, just saying, "Lord, save me!" And it disappeared. And then within a week, I leave the US and I moved to the UK. And then God was saying, "Look, they were going to eat you up. You were coming in there, naive and all excited about your music and how, but they were just going to eat you up."
And eat you up. And
yeah,
spit you out.
yeah.
No idea. I got invited to a dinner party. By who shall remain nameless.
Yeah, it's fine.
An industry executive in the Palisades. And I was excited because I was told that, it was going to be a party with a whole bunch of industry people. When I got there was nobody there except the gentleman. And I was like, well, where's everybody? Where is everybody? I came for a dinner party. And it just was weird. And while I was there, a celebrity that I knew who she was called him, and he had her on speakerphone while he was in the room with me. But then he took her off speakerphone and went into another room. But then he put her back on speakerphone, and I heard her say on speakerphone, "You're going to make him a star, aren't you?" And he said, "Well, we'll see what happens." I was like, "Oh, hell, I got to get out of here." And I was like, I forgot that I was supposed to be at another spot. I didn't know if I was saying whatever I was saying was making sense to him or not, but I didn't care. I got the ass up out of here.
Yeah.
And so I left. I mean, but he was saying things like, if you need money, just ask me. Just give me a call. You need $1,000, $5,000. Just give me a call. I got you. I was like, "Oh, well, thank you. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? You don't even know me." So I was too naive even to understand what was going on. But the thing that says go told me to go.
Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, but most importantly, to press the notification bell so that you can be notified when we do have a new interview. Loads to come. But thanks a lot for watching.
You know